I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hi, I'm Luke Ryan for JoBlo.com, and this is From Page to Screen. We've seen many iterations of that iconic web-slinging superhero on the big screen over the years, and today we're going to look at the very first, from 2002, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. While Andrew Garfield soldiered through that difficult second Spidey phase, and Tom Holland is now picking up the slack in fan-pleasing fashion, it was Tobey Maguire who was tasked with being the first on-screen Peter Parker in a live-action movie. Sam Raimi was an intriguing and excellent choice to direct the film, and Spider-Man was a part of that first wave in the early 2000s of what we now know as the modern superhero film, long before the monster Marvel Cinematic Universe kicked off later on in the decade. And while the 2002 Spider-Man was hugely successful, just how true was it to the source material? Well, the character of Spider-Man was created by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee. You've heard of Stan Lee, right? And he first appeared in the anthology comic book Amazing Fantasy number 15 in August of 1962. Lee and Ditko came up with the character of Peter Parker, an orphan being raised by his Uncle Ben and Aunt May in New York City. One day Peter is attending a science exhibition and gets bitten by a radioactive spider, the side effects of which give him incredible agility, amazing strength, and the ability to cling to most surfaces and scale any obstacle that comes in his way. Feeling quite cocky, Peter puts together a costume and becomes a novelty television star. However, his lust to use his newfound powers for fame soon comes crashing down on him as he ignores a thief in passing, and that same thief goes on to murder Peter's Uncle Ben. He learns the hard way that with great power comes a great responsibility. With his new powers, Peter takes to fighting crime in a costume, assuming the moniker of Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man isn't really a man, and what made the character stand out when it debuted in the 1960s is that Peter Parker was a main character superhero who was a teenager. Typically, teenage superhero characters would be relegated to the sidekick role, so Spider-Man was a breath of fresh air, and as a high school kid, became hugely popular with teenage readers. Peter can also shoot adhesive webbing from his wrists using web shooters he designed himself, which also displays his aptitude for science and technology. The character was quickly given his own comic, and The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 1 hit stands in March 1963. Initially, Peter romanced Gwen Stacy, who would go on to be killed in an altercation with Peter's arch-nemesis, the Green Goblin. However, a running gag had been introduced in issue number 15 in August 1964, when Peter's Aunt May begins to try to set him up on a date with the girl next door, Mary Jane Watson. After repeated references, Mary Jane was first seen over 2 years later in issue number 42, November 1966. Gwen Stacy was always intended to be Peter's one true love, but Mary Jane eventually became the frontrunner. In Raimi's big screen realization of Spider-Man, Kirsten Dunst was cast to play Mary Jane Watson, and Gwen Stacy was not included in the series until the third film in 2007, which... yeah, we'll just leave that one where it is. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was not the first live-action attempt at the character, as 3 TV movies were made starring Nicholas Hammond as the friendly neighborhood hero in Spider-Man, Spider-Man Strikes Back, and Spider-Man The Dragon's Challenge. There was also a 1978 film made in Japan that acted as a theatrical spin-off to the already existing TV show Spider-Man. But Sam Raimi's take was the first true blockbuster shot at the character, and many directors were considered for the film, including Ang Lee, Roland Emmerich, and David Fincher, who wanted to base the film around the night that Gwen Stacy died storyline, as opposed to an origin tale, which was rejected. James Cameron even had a hand in writing a screenplay at one point, which was later retooled by David Koepp. The studio expressed an interest in a lot of different actors to play the part of Peter Parker, such as Leonardo DiCaprio, Edward Furlong, Freddie Prinze Jr., and even Heath Ledger. Ultimately though, Tobey Maguire was cast. James Franco, who had also auditioned for the role of Peter Parker, was set to star as Harry Osborn, Peter's friend from the comics and son of Norman Osborn, portrayed by Willem Dafoe, after John Malkovich, Nicolas Cage, and John Travolta turned down the part. The story of the film follows Peter's Spider-Man origin story, pining for Mary Jane, struggling as an outsider in school, before getting bitten by a radioactive spider on a school excursion. He finds himself changing afterwards, with newfound abilities, including being able to shoot adhesive webbing organically from his wrists, in a departure from the comic book origin, where they were mechanical inventions by Peter. In another departure from the comic book origin, though there's still quite a few similarities, Peter decides to enter into a cash prize wrestling match as opposed to using his powers to gain fame on TV. When he gets stiffed on the payment, he decides to let a thief who steals the money go free. That thief, of course, goes on to murder Peter's Uncle Ben.
Thanks.
The antagonist of the film is Norman Osborn's psychotic alter ego, the Green Goblin. In the comics, the Green Goblin first appeared in issue number 14 of The Amazing Spider-Man in July 1964. Osborn was the head of a major firm, Oscorp Industries, and he becomes very unstable after his wife dies when his son Harry is very young. Eventually he turns against his partner at Oscorp, Mendel Stromm, a former professor whose work Norman appropriates. He finds an experimental strength and intelligence enhancement formula which he puts into a serum which comes out green and explodes in his face, giving him the increased physical strength and mental capacity, but at the cost of his sanity. As the Green Goblin, he aims to become the boss of New York's organized crime, and stopping Spider-Man is a natural given. Norman often doesn't remember his stints as the Green Goblin and develops amnesia before taking Gwen Stacy to a bridge where she loses her life. Peter is driven by revenge at the death of his girlfriend and tracks Norman back to his Green Goblin hideout, and Norman ends up getting impaled by his own glider. As you can see, the film follows a lot of the key beats of Spider-Man's origin story very closely. Mary Jane replaces Gwen Stacy in the bridge scenario but doesn't lose her life, and Norman's demise is practically identical. But of course, in the comics, no one is ever truly dead, and Norman does come back after the formula had left a healing quality inside his body, and many iterations of the Green Goblin continued on in the comics. One of the film's real strengths is the casting, from Cliff Robertson and Rosemary Harris playing Uncle Ben and Aunt May, to J.K. Simmons perfectly capturing the fan-favourite character of J. Jonah Jameson. The only real drastic change to the original character of Spider-Man was the organic web shooters, which some diehards hated and others accepted. The same can be said for Tobey Maguire's earnest performance as Spider-Man. A lot of people consider him to be the definitive actor to embody the role, and others are not big fans to say the least. Either way, along with films like X-Men in 2000, Spider-Man really laid the groundwork for what was just around the corner for big screen comic book movies. Hugh Jackman was even supposed to make a cameo appearance as Wolverine, but a dispute between the studios over the rights to the characters put a stop to it. Sounds familiar. Thanks for watching from Page to Screen. I've been Luke Ryan for JoBlo.com, and we'll see you next time.